Hey, yo, what's up? We got another video today. We're watching another cool chill video. You know what I mean? No hype, no drama, just learning about cool constructions that change history. This one's going to be the warship that ended an era by Deconstructed. Let's get into it. Bing.
War Thunder. For centuries, warships were towering wooden vessels lined with broadside cannons, but they lacked armor, could only fire within a narrow arc, and depended entirely on the wind.
Narrow arc
Then,
or
in
Zorro
1862, everything changed when the USS Monitor arrived. Low to the water, forged in iron, steam-driven, and crowned with a rotating turret that could fire in nearly any direction, revolutionizing naval warfare. In this video, we've modeled the entire USS Monitor inside and out to see how this radical vessel works and why it became the blueprint for the modern Navy. But before we get into it, this is Deconstructed. We break down the engineering behind history's most fascinating machines, vehicles, and structures. So, let's see how it all works. During the American Civil War, the Union and Confederacy found themselves in a rapidly escalating technological arms race. Each side was searching for an edge, a single innovation that could tip the balance. The turning point came when the steam frigate USS Merrimack, which had been scuttled by the Union, was raised by Confederate forces. They rebuilt and converted her into an ironclad, an armored steam-powered warship, renaming her CSS Virginia. As the Virginia was being built, Union forces rushed to combat this threat by building an ironclad of its own, the USS Monitor. They selected the design of naval engineer John Erickson, whose proposal was unlike anything the Navy had ever seen. A low-profile hull with a rotating gun turret mounted on top. The USS Monitor would become the first U.S. Navy vessel to feature a revolving gun turret, a breakthrough that would go on to revolutionize naval warfare and warship design entirely. Construction moved at breakneck speed. Built in just roughly 100 days, Monitor was launched days prior to the Virginia from the Brooklyn Navy Yard in January 1862, making her the first ironclad commissioned by the U.S. Navy. A few weeks later, the two ironclads met in battle. The Battle of Hampton Roads was part of the Confederate effort to break the Union blockade, which had cut off Virginia's largest cities from international trade. What followed became one of the most iconic naval engagements in American history. The first battle between two ironclad warships. On March 9, 1862, the Monitor and the Virginia met at dawn. Monitor was smaller, less than 2/3 the length of the Virginia, and only about a quarter of her displacement, but the armored ships proved evenly matched. The battle raged on for 4 relentless hours. Neither ship could sink the other, but the Monitor succeeded in her objective. The Virginia failed to break the blockade. The clash marked a decisive turning point in naval warfare. News of the battle spread across the world, and its impact was immediate.
So they had one ship each. They were just like, yeah, 1v1
warships. The age of the ironclad had begun. Ironclads marked the dawn of modern naval warfare, and you can command the machines that followed in War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. Available for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. Command
I was
over
gonna say World of
2,500
Warships
tanks,
Legends maybe,
planes,
but
helicopters,
that
and
is
even
just
ships
warships.
from
So I
across
guess
10
War
major
Thunder is probably just all encompassing.
Don't wait.
Land,
This
sea,
offer is
sky.
only available for a limited time.
All right.
Before we dive into the details of the USS Monitor itself, it's important to understand the state of naval warfare leading up to this turning point in history. For centuries, the world's major navies were dominated by wooden, sail-powered warships. Their cannons were arranged in fixed broadsides, long rows of guns lining each side of the hull. This style had worked for ages, but it came with serious flaws. Wooden hulls were vulnerable to explosive shell fire, which could shatter exposed timber and start fires. And broadside armament introduced tactical limitations. The guns could only fire across a restricted arc on either side of the ship. Targeting required the entire ship to maneuver into position, and only one side's guns could be brought to bear at a time.
At the same time.
Enormous firepower, but very inefficiently used. When steam-powered warships had come into play in the mid-19th century, like the USS Merrimack, they still carried full sailing rigs and relied on traditional broadside gun batteries along their sides.
That's funny.
The CSS Virginia represented an important transition, a step between the traditional broadside ships and the modern turret warships that would follow. The Virginia, which had no sails, was a casemate ironclad with an iron-plated wooden hull. Its guns were housed inside a single armored structure with sloped sides on the main deck. This protected the battery more effectively than wood ever could, but the ship still relied on the traditional broadside firing arrangement and inherited all of its limitations. The USS
Except they
Monitor
just cut
broke
off the
that
range
pattern
completely.
For the first time, a warship's
They
main
said,
guns
we're
could be
about to
aimed
rotate.
independently of the ship's orientation, able to rotate nearly 360
That's cool.
degrees. Instead
Like
of
somebody's
lining
getting
both
flanked.
sides
Oh,
of
we're
the
getting
hull
flanked.
with dozens of smaller guns, Monitor concentrated her firepower into fewer, larger cannons that could be all trained on a single target
Oh, there's
at
still
once.
cannons?
This wasn't just a new ship. It was an
funny.
entirely new
Wait,
way
how
of
many
thinking.
cannons?
Single target at once. Firepower into fewer, larger cannons that could be all
Okay,
trained
okay.
on a single target at once. This
So it
wasn't
was
just
like
a new
2
ship.
or
It was
3.
an entirely new way of thinking about naval combat. Before we dive deeper, we actually turned this video into something you can own. We created a detailed USS Monitor poster, mapping
Oh,
out
is this
every
on
detail.
Nebula?
Each of our videos is made entirely by humans and takes hundreds of
Oh,
hours
that's-
of research, modeling, and
cool
animation,
thing.
and every purchase directly
cool,
supports the channel and the
poster.
team behind it. Grab
And the
yours
part
through the
about
link in the
them all
description.
making it.
We're also giving
I
one
love
away.
that.
For a chance to win one, like this video,
Not like I'm
subscribe, and
against-
comment below. What
I'm not
surprised you
completely
most
against
about the
using
USS
AI,
Monitor?
but I'm also
We'll announce
like
the winner in
completely
the next
appreciative
video.
of everything that's
Now
like
let's see just
purely
what made her
human
so
made,
different.
You know what I mean?
First, let's look at the USS Monitor as she appeared in July 1862
'Cause it depends.
after the Battle of Hampton
I
Roads.
feel like it depends
She
on the
measured
level of
54.6
AI
meters in
involvement.
length, roughly the length of 4 city buses, and had a beam of 12.6 meters. Her most defining
And where
feature,
in the
the gun
process?
turret, was 6.1 meters in diameter. Monitor wasn't fast. Her top speed was about 7 knots, or around 13 kilometers per hour. She was operated by a crew of about 50 officers and enlisted men. Monitor was powered by steam alone. She was the first American warship without any masts or sails, a complete break from centuries of naval tradition. The vessel's most striking feature was the large cylindrical gun turret. Built from 200 millimeters of iron plate armor, its rounded shape helped deflect incoming cannon fire. It sat amidships on the spar deck, a flat upper deck positioned just above the
Is
waterline.
that steel too?
And speaking of being close to
Or
the
iron?
water, Monitor's hull sat so low that very little of the ship was visible above the waves, earning
That's
her
cool.
the
That's like
nickname,
a submarine.
cheese box on a raft. All jokes aside, this low profile drastically reduced the target area exposed to enemy
Yeah.
guns. An
It's like a
iron-plated armor
pseudo-submarine.
belt wrapped around the hull at the waterline for
Submarine.
protection, and her flat-bottomed hull gave her a very shallow draft,
So
making
where's
her
the
ideal
crew?
for coastal
They're
and
like
river
underneath,
operations,
right?
though poorly suited for the rough open ocean. With her
They had to
shape
be,
and
right?
profile in mind, we can move in closer, starting at the bow and working our way to the stern to see how every external feature served a purpose.
Okay,
At
let's
the
see.
bow was the ship's anchor well. When the cover was lifted, it revealed a recessed opening that housed the anchor below the spar
Oh,
deck.
okay.
The crew raised or lowered the anchor from inside the ship, allowing them to remain fully protected under armor rather than working exposed on the deck during combat. Immediately after that was the pilot house, a compact iron beam reinforced structure
he is-
housing the ship's helm, which
he
was
is
used
in
to
there.
steer the ship. It was accessed from inside, and the crew could see out only through narrow slits between the beams. Its forward placement blocked the turret's guns from firing directly ahead, and after the Battle of Hampton Roads, angled armor plates were added to help deflect incoming fire. A canvas canopy was later fitted over the top of the turret. The turret roof itself
weather?
was made of perforated iron plate, which vented gun smoke and allowed airflow during combat. The canopy provided shade, shed rain, and gave officers a place to stand when the ship was not in battle. Just behind the turret were the smokestacks, venting exhaust from the boilers below, followed by the blower air intakes, which circulated air throughout the vessel and into the boilers. At the stern was a single 4-bladed screw
rudder.
propeller, positioned right next to the
Propeller,
rudder
I
that
mean.
steered the ship.
And
The
rudder,
turret
yeah.
was capable of a full 360-degree rotation, completing a full turn in about 22 seconds. Including the guns
Whoa.
inside, the turret weighed about 163 metric tons, the weight of more than 4 fully loaded semi-trailer trucks. Inside were 2 11-inch Dahlgren smoothbore shell guns, each weighing around
was it so heavy?
7,200 kilograms. They were muzzle-loading naval guns capable of firing 75-kilogram solid shot to a range of roughly 3,300 meters,
That's
with a practical
crazy.
rate of fire of 1 round every few minutes. Each gun required a crew of about 8 men, with roughly
How did they
17 men and 2 officers working
how did they
inside the
pick up
turret during battle. The guns were mounted on rolling carriages, moving on iron rails set into the turret floor. A friction braking mechanism, called a compressor, absorbed the gun's recoil after firing in
said
order
how
to
much
prevent it
again?
from slamming into the rear of the turret.
So it's like a
This was
1,000
controlled
pounds.
by a large brass handwheel, which tightened or loosened iron clamps pressing against wooden guides beneath the carriages. The only glimpse of the outside world came through the gun ports. When the guns were withdrawn for reloading or not in use, heavy iron port stoppers swung down to shut the openings. Azimuth, or left to right aim, was controlled by rotating the turret, while elevation was adjusted using an elevator screw at the rear of each gun. A hatch in the turret floor allowed crew access and ammunition transfer, but only when the turret was rotated to align with the deck opening below. Beneath the turret
I
floor,
bet.
the turret's
I
base
wonder,
was
did they have to fire from like super close range, or were they just like missing a bunch of shots, or were there like who was telling them like where to shoot? Because I imagine like they had some kind of like comm system going on probably between them that they were like, oh, the enemy's at so and so, fire at so and so at so and so time to catch them, and then communicated it back to those guys because they can't see out of it other than like the gun port, right? So, mate, were they just eyeballing it? They were just looking out the gun port, like, all right, bet over there. Like, what was
connected
going
to a
on?
large vertical shaft
What
linked
was
to the
that
turret drive
about?
mechanism located below the spar deck. The
Okay.
shaft was driven through a 2-stage gear system powered by a pair of compact steam-powered donkey engines. Passing
Donkey
below the
engines.
spar deck led into the ship's only interior deck, located
Donkey.
beneath the waterline. This deck was divided amidships by a structural bulkhead, with crew spaces forward and machinery spaces aft. 2 large oval iron hatchways in the bulkhead allowed passage between the 2 sections. At the bow, beneath the pilot house, was the chain locker, holding the anchor
Whoa, the
chain and the
chain locker.
capstan used to raise and lower it. This area also served as the boatswain store, used to store tools and materials for maintenance, and contained the ladder
thought they
leading up
said
to the
store.
pilot house.
I was like, what?
The
They
helm
had a
wheel
store
inside
in
the
there
pilot
and
house
shit.
controlled the rudder through a gear and rope system. The crew's quarters were split into 2 areas, which were separated by a wooden bulkhead with a door in the center. Forward were the officers' quarters, a compact cluster of 8 officer cabins, 2 rooms for the captain, a private cabin with one of the ship's 4 toilets, and a
Said 2
stateroom
rooms
for
for the
conducting
captain.
daily duties. The ward room sat at the center, a shared dining and meeting space. Each cabin had a thick porthole set into the deck above. Aft of the officer spaces was the berth deck, where the enlisted men slept in hammocks.
Birth?
It was crowded and offered no privacy. This same deck held the powder magazine, starboard, and the shell
Crazy.
rooms, port, which stored explosive projectiles, fuses, and primers. Non-explosive cannonballs were stacked in the center of the berth deck, as
Okay.
well as stored inside the turret itself. Storage closets and pantries occupied the remaining outboard
They were
spaces along
sleeping
the
in
hull.
there?
Just aft of the midship structural bulkhead was the ship's
They
galley,
were just
where
sleeping
meals
next to
were
the
prepared.
cannonballs.
A large iron stove stood directly against the monitor's boilers. In the same area were the crew's and officers' heads, or the ship's toilets. Aft of the galley was where the
You just
ship
gotta
machinery was
use the
located.
space then.
Directly behind the galley stood 2 boilers, which supplied the steam needed to power both the main engine and the auxiliary systems throughout the vessel. Farther aft was the main engine itself, which drove the monitor's single propeller. Along the port and starboard sides of this machinery space were the coal bunkers, partitioned off to store the fuel that kept the ship running. Each boiler was a double furnace, horizontal fire tube design. Coal was shoveled into the firebox, where it burned to produce the intense heat needed to generate steam. The hot gases then passed through rows of horizontal tubes surrounded by water, transferring their heat and generating the steam that powered the ship. From there, the exhaust gases rose through the uptakes and out the smokestacks, while the steam moved through the main steam pipe and into the engine. Monitor used a vibrating side lever engine that featured 2 horizontal cylinders mounted back to back, each containing a trunk piston that moved on a horizontal plane instead of the vertical motion seen in other steamship engines. This configuration was chosen because its compact,
Yeah, it
low-profile
needs to be
layout allowed it to
compact.
fit
I was
below the
figuring that.
waterline. Each
Yeah, I
cylinder
figured
had
as
its
much.
own set of sliding valves that
I
regulated
figured
steam
as
flow in and
much.
out by moving side to side. These valves were driven by rods linked to eccentrics, circular discs
Eccentrics.
mounted off-center on the engine crankshaft below. Each cylinder had a steam chest where steam coming from the boiler entered.
Steam chest.
These cylinders used two valves, a cutoff valve, which controlled how long steam was admitted in the cylinder, and a main valve, which directed steam to either side of the piston and exhausted it. Let's take a closer look at the operating cycle inside one of the two cylinders.
I'm following along.
After passing the
mostly.
valves, steam entered the cylinder and pushed the piston outward. As the piston moved, the cutoff valve gradually closed, preventing any additional steam flow. The trapped steam continued to expand, driving the piston to the end of its stroke. At this point, the main valve shifted to its exhaust position, allowing the now lower pressure steam to leave the cylinder and move into the condenser. This cycle repeated on the opposite side of the piston for the return stroke. Each piston was linked by a connecting rod to a short lever arm on a rock shaft, one that oscillates instead of rotating, located on each side of the engine. A second lever arm aft on the rock shaft transmitted this motion through another connecting rod to the crankshaft, which in turn drove the propeller shaft, converting the rocking motion into rotary motion. As the collection point for the exhaust steam, the condenser was located at the aft end of the engine on the starboard side. A third lever arm extending from the engine's port rock shaft drove three pumps simultaneously through a connecting rod attached to the arm. The feed pump on the forward side, the air pump in the center, and the bilge pump on the aft side, which was used to remove bilge water. The condenser was a jet injection type, meaning seawater was pumped inside and sprayed directly into the incoming exhaust steam, rapidly condensing it into liquid water that collected at the bottom of the condenser. The resulting mixture was then pumped up to the hot well by the air pump through a series of unidirectional valves located on either side of the condenser, where the feed pump returned it to the boilers as feed water and the excess was expelled overboard. The USS Monitor was revolutionary, but it also had its limitations. The low freeboard and heavy turret made the ship unstable in rough seas, ultimately causing the Monitor to sink during a storm on December 31st, 1862. The low freeboard and heavy turret made the ship unstable in rough seas, ultimately causing the Monitor to sink during a storm on December 31st, 1862, less than a year after her launch. Her wreck remained lost until it was discovered more than 100 years later in 1973 off the Outer Banks of North Carolina near Cape Hatteras. Even still, the Monitor's legacy endured long after she vanished below the waves. Armored warships with rotating gun turrets became the new standard, ideas that evolved through ironclads and dreadnoughts into the massive battleships of World War II. I want to give one final shout out to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Sign up and play for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile by using my links in the pinned comment.
Said AW War Thunder for people who are playing that. But yeah, that's gonna be the video. I hope y'all liked it. That was pretty cool. That was pretty informative. I like that. I am really tired right now, actually. A little bit of a low energy reaction, I guess. Which is cool, you know, we need a little chill one to balance it, you know what I mean? Balance it out. But that's going to be the video. I hope y'all liked it. Go ahead and like if you did, and subscribe if you want to see more. And dislike it if you didn't. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.